Hello and welcome once again to this Red Gaming Tech video of myself, Marta, where unfortunately I'm still a little stuffed up, so do bear with me on that, but feeling much better. Anywho, so we're going to start things off with a little something from AMD at Hot Chips 2019. So this was an interesting conference for AMD. They talked a lot about Moore's Law and all the stuff they've achieved and all that sort of thing. As expected, there were no new announcements really, but we did have some comments from Lisa Su, who spoke to Untitled.com, and you'll find their live blog linked in the description below this video. So they discussed a few things, but there's a couple of things I want to talk about. They asked her about Crossfire and whether or not it's coming back. Of course, it's missing from this current generation. And Lisa Su said, quote, "We love gamers and we always talk about gamers. I would say that GPU performance will continue to go forward at a fast pace. To be honest, the software is going faster than the hardware. I would say that Crossfire isn't a significant focus. GPUs can do a lot in the consumer space." So she didn't really answer the question, but it's pretty clear that I'm not planning on bringing Crossfire back anytime soon. They're more worried about making the best graphics cards they can. If they can do Crossfire, I'm sure they will, but it seems that they've got no hard plans to be bringing it back for the next gen or anything like that, but we may see it just as a throw-in. We'll have to see, of course. So, the more interesting thing that they discussed was actually Workstation. Of course, Paul did a really lengthy video yesterday, if you haven't seen it, where he talked a lot about Threadripper. Go and check that out. You will find it linked in the description below this video, and everything we know and speculate about the third generation of Threadripper, which is codenamed Castle Peak. And Alan Tech asked Lisa Su, quote, "How is AMD approaching the workstation market? How does it pertain to Threadripper?" And she said, quote, "We love the workstation market, and yes, there will be a next generation of Threadripper." And Alan Tech did try to press her for when we're going to be getting it. Unfortunately, she just said, "I said soon, is that enough?" And Alan Tech, unsurprisingly, were like, "Actually, no, it's not." And then she went on to say that it would be within a year, and then promised that we will see, more about Threadripper in 2019. So what that tells me is we're not getting a Threadripper in 2019, it's going to be 2020, but we will hear more about what's going on with that particular segment of AMD's CPU lineup this year. So, good news. So as I said, no real announcements, but very cool to know that we will be learning more about Threadripper this year. So, we're going to be moving on now to Intel, who had a few things to say about their arch rivals. So, Intel are going to be at Gamescom, which has already begun actually, the 20th to the 24th of August it's going to be going on, so they're on the campaign trail. And they've had quite a bit to say about not only themselves, but also their competitors AMD. Now obviously we've been talking a lot about how well Ryzen has been doing lately, and obviously Intel have been very keen to keep an eye on that, and Intel's Troy Severson said, quote, "A year ago when we introduced the i9-9900K, it was dubbed the fastest gaming CPU in the world. I can honestly say nothing's changed. It's still the fastest gaming CPU in the world. I think you've had a lot of press from the competition recently when we go out and actually do real-world testing, not synthetic benchmarks, but doing real-world testing of how these games perform on our platform. We stack the 9900K against the Ryzen 9 3900X. They're running a 12-core part, and we're running an 8-core. But the thing is, like, yes, that is technically true, but that lead does kind of disappear when you crank up the resolutions. It kind of becomes a sort of back and forth between the two processors, with certain games performing better on a certain processor and then, not performing as well on that same processor as versus the competitor one. Point is, technically it's true, but the 3900X still does very well, and obviously more cores as well for the same price. But Intel are unsurprisingly still very confident, and they went on to say, quote, "So again, you are hearing a lot of stuff from our competition. I'll be very honest, very blunt, say, hey, they've done a great job closing the gap, but we still have the highest performing CPUs in the industry for gaming, and we're going to maintain that edge." Very bold statements from Intel there, I'm sure you'll agree. So obviously we do know that 3950X is yet to come out, and obviously Intel are working on Comet Lake, which is not out yet. So I expect things are going to be heating up significantly between the two companies. Whether or not Intel is able to maintain the quote-unquote edge that Troy Severson spoke about, well, we're going to have to wait and see on that one, unfortunately. Speaking of Intel, however, we have a very nice reveal from Intel. not Intel, sorry, from Asus, but also leads into Intel. Now, as I said, Gamescom is currently underway, and at that very same event, Asus actually announced a few very interesting things. They have launched the specifications page for their new X29 lineup, X299, sorry, should I say, and it also does state that they will be supporting the i9 10000X series processors. What is that, I hear you ask? Well, this is going to be based on Cascade Lake X. So this tells us a couple of things. First of all, it's most likely going to be using the 10,000 nomenclature for the actual series itself, but we also see we're going to be seeing up to 48 PCIe Gen 3 lanes, which is a bit of an upgrade from the current, which is 44. So a slight improvement, but nothing, world-ending, I'm sure you can agree, but Cascade Lake is not expected to really set the world on fire, simply because it's still restricted to the 14nm process. Now, obviously, we should wait and see until the products are actually out and in the hands of reviewers so we can see the actual performance improvements over Skylake X, but they're looking to not be overly impressive, to be honest. But that's not taking any away from Asus here. The X299 series does look rather nice. And we're also going to be seeing, judging from this, that we will see Cascade Lake X work with 256 gigs of memory. So, with all that said, let's move on to our next topic, which is something rather interesting regarding the PlayStation 5. So, what we actually have is yet another patent which has surfaced. Now, for the moment, the source for this is letsgodigital.org, as they have found a new patent for this on the World Intellectual Property Office Database, or WIPO, or WIPO, however you want to say it. Now, unfortunately, the actual source for this, the actual listing on the database itself, has not been located, so the source for this is just a PDF on their website itself. All that aside, however, the patent in question was registered as a Sony device on August the 13th after applying for the patent back in May. So it shows a device. It's not actually labelled as a PS5, but if you just look at it on the screen, what else could this actually be? If this is legit, it could very well be the PlayStation 5. So let's assume that this is the actual design for the console. Well, it's rather unusual, to say the least. It is a very unusual design. It's got this kind of V divot in the middle where you see a lot of slots for fans or air ducts, or maybe both. We don't obviously know. It's obviously a V-shaped, so V for 5, which will make sense. And then there's a few USB slots on the front, and you can see what look like a few ports, but it's hard to tell if they're just part of the design, if they're just going to be power lights or something else. But you can clearly see a disk drive, so obviously we're not going diskless, but we kind of already knew that. And we see some more ribbed edges as well, which is probably more ventilation. So there's a couple of things. Now this could be an early build. Now you may remember those ridiculous looking PS3 controller patents back in the day. And now it's very possible that those were once what the PS3 controllers were going to look like in line drawings. And obviously we got the DualShock 3, which is fine. So this doesn't necessarily mean that this, even if this is legit, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is what the PlayStation 5 is actually going to look like. Sony are going to go with whatever is coolest, whatever is easiest to package and ship, and all the rest of it, and obviously what is not overly expensive to produce. And I have a feeling that this might be a little more expensive just because of the unusual design. Obviously they want to differentiate it from the PS4, so we're going to see some changes, obviously, but will we see this so drastic? It's really impossible to say. This very well could be exactly what we see on our shelves in Holiday 2020, or it could be a version of this. We just don't know. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one, guys. If this was what the PlayStation 5 was to look like, what do you think of this design? Do you think it looks good? No? In between? Or something else? Let me know your thoughts, because this is definitely eye-grabbing with the unusual design, and perhaps that's entirely what Sony are going to go for here. No way of knowing, regrettably. But let me know your thoughts on everything we've discussed in this video. As I said, Gamescom is currently ongoing, so we can very much expect to see lots and lots of announcements coming out of that, and I'm really interested to see what we see. I most likely will do a roundup of everything we discussed at Gamescom after the event is actually finished. So we'll go through the highlights of what was actually revealed. I'm fully expecting lots of games for this year and probably some teasers for next year as well. There's already been a new Gears 5 trailer which actually looks pretty legit. Anyway, that is me done for this video. Thank you so much for watching as always. Your support is highly appreciated and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.